Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Actionable Futurist and author of Digitally Curious, Andrew Grill.
I want to ask you all one simple question. Are you digitally curious? Now you may say, Andrew, what are you talking about? We just spent a whole day talking about AI and new innovations. Well, I'm going to find out right here, right now, how digitally curious this room is. I've generated a no-tech, low-touch, ESD-friendly way. Can I get you all to stand up, please? We're going to play a little game. I'm going to ask you 6 very simple questions. And if you're doing what's on the screen, you can stay standing. If not, I'll get you to resume your seat. However, the magic of this low tech is that if later on, what's on the screen you're doing, you can actually stand up again. Okay, question 1. Stay standing if you've Googled yourself lately. Oh, come on, not everyone's Googled. Yes, okay. Some non-Googlers, that's all right. Let's see if you can redeem yourself. Question 2. Stay standing or stand back up again if you've listened to a podcast in the last week. Okay, a few more podcasters, that's fantastic, getting more curious. Next one's really important, I'll explain why in about 25 minutes. Stay standing or stand back up again if you've got 2-factor authentication on for everything. LinkedIn, Gmail, WhatsApp. Okay, we've lost a few. Those of you sitting down, you are going to get hacked. But more on that a bit later on. Next question is an AI question. Stay standing or stand back up again if you've created an image with AI. Okay, I did this one of zebras, a National Geographic. I said some zebras drinking at a waterhole. You can even create your own action figure. Anyone done one of these? Available, you can get the whole set. Okay, next AI question. Stay standing or stand back up again if you've used AI to summarise a meeting. Copilot, my favourite Otter. Okay, very good. Last question to see how digitally curious this room is, and you're pretty curious. Stay standing or stand up if you've bought some crypto. There's always 3. Fantastic. Okay, give yourselves a round of applause. A very digitally curious audience. Now, I've asked those questions for about the last 6 or 7 years, and the response stays fairly the same. Not everyone is doing all those things. So tonight, tomorrow, next week, ask yourself the question, why am I not doing those things? What's stopping me from being curious to discover these new technologies and expand my horizons? Now, I have been curious my whole life. Back when I was age 6, I used to play with these 101 electronic kits. I'd build burglar alarms and shortwave radios, and I was really intrigued in what technology could do. This was my first computer in 1980. Anyone remember this? The dear old Sinclair ZX80. 1K of RAM, 4K of ROM. A few weeks ago I was at the Science Museum and it's now behind a glass case. So either I'm really old or it's being preserved for posterity. Show of hands. Who here was born after 1983? All right, quite a few of you. I've been online longer than you've been alive. Back in 1983 I was dialing up. Remember this noise? You're dialing up to the internet, hoping it would connect. And I knew back in 1983 that I was hooked on this online thing because my father had to get a second phone line. I was always dialed up and no one could get through. Now, this afternoon, I'm going to throw a lot of information at you deliberately, but fear not, technology is at hand. At the end, I'm going to show you a QR code that will take you to a mini website that will list all the things I've mentioned, all the tools, a bunch of books to read, some podcasts to listen to, so everything will be there for you to look at later on. Now, I've been so curious over the last 50-odd years that I actually wrote a book called Digitally Curious and explains how and why you should be curious. And at the end, if we have time for questions, the most curious question will receive a signed copy. So think up your questions now. But this is not my first rodeo with SAP Concur. Last year I did a book launch in the Concur offices there, which was fantastic. And this morning we mentioned one of my favourite travel apps, that's TripIt. So what I did is I went to my app and I grabbed my travel stats. So I've done 3.5 million kilometres and I've been a TripIt user since 2010. And I love it. So when I started working with SAP Concur, I said, you know that I've been a TripIt user for a long time. But continuing the curious theme, I really think that the future belongs to the curious. If you're curious about the world around you, if you're curious about the technology I'm going to talk about today, you will be in the driver's seat. The challenge, though, is that we've had 10 years of innovation in just 2. Back when ChatGPT sprung onto the scene, I've never seen advances in technology quite like this. I've been playing with this tech all my life, professionally for the last 30 plus years, and I've never seen something be adopted so fast, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But digital curiosity is the start. Next comes digital literacy. Do you understand the words and phrases that are being thrown at you? And I set myself a challenge. So in the back of the book, I actually list 200 different bits of technical jargon and terminology. And I really wanted to see what were the different things that people had heard of. And as we're flicking through, you might go, I'm not sure about that one. But having that digital literacy means that you are confident in talking about new technologies when they come to fruition. But today I want to cut through the AI hype. We see so much of it in the media. It's full of my LinkedIn feed. There are so many people saying, you've got to be on the train, you're way behind. I do talks like this 2 to 3 times a week at the moment. I'm in the trenches. I'm talking to companies like Fujifilm that are doing photocopiers, and I'm talking to companies that measure waste in reactors. The full gamut of society. And people are really confused. But if we're to talk about AI and where it's come from and where it's going, we have to go back to the origin in 1950, and Dr. Alan Turing, who wrote a white paper titled Computing, Machinery and Intelligence. And the first line of that white paper asked a question: can machines think? And I think 75 years later, we now know the answer. We're getting a lot closer to machines being able to think like we do. If we fast forward a little bit to 1956, John McCarthy held a 6-week-long artificial intelligence workshop. So the words and phrases artificial intelligence are nearly 70 years old. This is not new. But the way we're using it, how it's accelerated, is why we're talking about it today. Let's come a little bit further forward to 2017. And some smart researchers at Google wrote a white paper called Attention is All You Need. And this was the catalyst for today's generative AI. Had they not made this discovery about how you can actually look at words and phrases and make new things out of them, we wouldn't have the ChatGPTs, we wouldn't have Joule and those sorts of things either. Who knows what happened on November 30th, 2022? It was the day that ChatGPT was launched. And the news networks went crazy and everyone was talking about it. Show of hands, who knows what the GPT stands for? It stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. So the next pub quiz you're going to win. Generative because it refers to the model's ability to create or generate text or images or video from existing data. Pre-trained because it's learned by looking at data such as the open internet. You can go to a website, commoncrawl.org, and you can download a zip file of the internet, which is how some of these systems have been trained. And finally, transformer, it's a neural network architecture that allows you to transform one thing into the other. And often I'm asked as a futurist, Andrew, can you explain in layperson's terms how these things work? So I actually asked ChatGPT, how do you work? And the last paragraph is the really important bit. And what I'm going to do next is massively oversimplify how generative AI systems work. They essentially predict the next word in a sentence. Now, those of you that are quite up with the terminology will go, that's a massive oversimplification. It is. But let me give you an example. If I ask you who was the first person to land on the moon, you'd say it's Neil Armstrong. We learnt that at school. We know that to be true. Well, ChatGPT and others will tell you the same thing, but it has no idea whether the answer is right. Mathematically, the most likely next words in that sentence are Neil and Armstrong. So whether you're writing a poem or making a critical decision, you always need to think about what's coming out of your AI systems. But we want to also look at moving beyond generative AI. You might say, Andrew, hang on, we've just got a handle on Gen AI. I've started using ChatGPT on a daily basis, and now you're saying we're moving beyond. The challenge is that these generative AI systems are thinkers, not doers. They give us great answers, and they say, here is the answer, it's up to you to implement. And even systems that we've seen from Joule are still giving you answers and not necessarily doing everything for you just yet. So we're still the doers. What we're going to hear a lot about this year, not just from organisations like SAP Concur, but others, is Agentic AI or AI agents. My LinkedIn feed is full of people talking about it, and they're saying this is the future, which it is, but it is actually quite difficult to do. And that's why we saw in all the announcements today, this is the first phase, and it's going to do more and more and more. Let me give you an example of where I think Agentic AI will end up. If I think back to my time at IBM, I was a partner, so I had an executive assistant called Karen. And Karen was great at anticipating my needs. So an email would come in from head office saying, we need you in Armonk next week. So Karen would take things into her own hands. She would go look at my schedule, my travel. She would book me a flight on BA because I'm a frequent flyer. It's in policy. She would put me in the seat I like to sit in. She would book me a room at the Hilton Fashion District on the high side, and she would know that I got a good rate from the people there because she was anticipating my needs. What we're going to see from Agentic AI and tools like Joule as they move forward is Karen is going to be there in the background anticipating your needs. This device we carry around with us knows everything about us. It knows our next meeting. It knows our bank balance. It knows all of our contacts. So if we let it and we trust it, we'll actually have the true promise of AI where it is doing lots of things for us. But we're not there yet. So SAP Concur, Joule Copilot, is a really good example of how companies like SAP Concur are at the forefront of delivering these experiences. And it's taken them a couple of years, because this is hard to do. And one of the biggest things in Agentic AI will be the notion of trust. So I trust my Agentic AI to book a meeting request. Do I trust it to access my personal bank account? Not just yet, or my corporate bank account. So one thing that you've seen today is using it for expense allocation. On the QR code, you'll see a reference to my own podcast called Digitally Curious. And Christian O was actually on my podcast last week. It's the latest episode. And so I'm going to show you a very short clip of part of our discussion where we talked about how Joule will help people in the room today.
With AI then says, oh, Andrew was at Prep Manager, tapped it, it was, 10 pounds and so forth. It's likely lunch. And it was on this date. So let me start creating the expense claim even before that credit card transaction arrives maybe in 24 to 48 hours later within Concur expense. And if it's a big amount, Joule would then say, it was maybe 50 pounds at Prep Manager. Did you have others with you? Should this be called entertainment expense or a lunch expense? Who are those other attendees?
So we're seeing the first phase of Agentic, and I'm proud to be working with SAP Concur because you are really doing things in the direction of travel that it needs to be, especially for things like expense management and travel. But one thing I get asked all the time, no matter the audience, is, Andrew, will AI take my job? Because I'm a bit concerned. If it can do all these things, what am I going to be doing? Well, there's a phrase that's around that is often overused, but I'm going to use it and then I'm going to augment it. AI won't replace people. People who use AI will replace people who don't. Now, that phrase has been around for a while, and part of it is true and part of it isn't. I think there's a third part to it, that AI will demand better people. Not nicer people, not smarter people, but if AI can do things really well at speed and scale that we can't, it's going to deliver us information and insight, and we're going to have to be ready to say, does that make sense? Should we approve that? Is that something that we should look at for our business strategy? So AI is going to demand that we're actually better at our job, and our job will become more important. It'll be a bit like having an always-on company expert. And if those of you who have been playing with Joule, you can start asking it questions about travel policy. Most people I know don't read travel policies, but when they need to know, can I claim on this, that they need to ask someone. And having an AI, generative AI assistant there, being able to answer those questions is going to be very, very useful. But I think 2025 is actually the year we start to see AI on the org chart. It's not going away. It's there. It's a thing. So maybe we're going to start to augment our org charts with all of our humans, and then underneath we have our Agentic AI doing all these sorts of things for us. And a bit like the example with Karen, my former EA, when she goes off and books the British Airways, well, that's the Agentic AI part of Joule going and doing that without you having to even worry about it. So we're going to have a lot of automation that we should start to embrace. I think also very soon we're going to start to see the rise of the AI-powered board member. Let me give you an example. I sit on a charity board here in London. I've been on the board for 2 years. I know 2 years of financials and 2 years of company accounts and 2 years of what we've been doing. But the organisation's been going for 60. So let's look at 60 years of knowledge. So if I was able to train an AI with 60 years of corporate knowledge, and we had a really critical business decision to make, would you ask the 2-year experienced board member or someone who had 60 years? Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that this is going to replace a board member, but think about AIs becoming your decision partner. If you can use it to fish up information that's buried deep inside the organisation, you can ask it those sort of questions. So how are others using AI? I want to give you 2 examples from 2 companies we know and use all the time. One is Amazon. I was on stage a couple of years ago in Abu Dhabi with the CTO of Amazon, Werner Vogels, and he put up this slide, and I've shamelessly stolen it. Look at all the areas of their business. Werner said, I don't know what the big fuss about AI is. We've been using AI at Amazon for 25 years. We sell it as a service. We use it internally. Look at all the areas where they use AI today. That might explain why you have a fairly frictionless experience when you buy things from Amazon. The second example I want to use is Dell. I've been working with Dell in partnership as well. And last year I got to see their CTO, John Rosey, speak in London. And let's just listen to what he had to say.
What makes your organization special? What is it about your company that differentiates you? Because the purpose of AI is to give you an advantage. At Dell, we went through that exercise, and it's pretty obvious. We picked 4 things that make us special: our global supply chain, our global service organization, our global sales capability, and our global engineering capability. If any of those 4 get better in a material way, I win. In our sales activity, we know that our sales force is a powerful entity. It's one of the biggest enterprise sales force in the world. They have great effectiveness when they're in front of customers. We then did the process analysis and found that 40% of their time is preparing to get in front of customers. That is not valuable. And it turns out the problem in there was not they're doing something wrong, it's just they're navigating hundreds of sources of content and they spend all kinds of time finding information and organizing it before they come and talk to you. Sounds like a very good Gen AI use case. And so we are doing that. But imagine if every salesperson in Dell could be in front of customers 30% more. Material impact, I will make more money, I will win in the market, I will be successful. So that's the first step. Know what problem you are solving and make sure it aligns to your business and it's specific enough that you can do something with AI to it.
So 3 really important things there. Now, that was a sales example, and I'm in a room full of people that are working in finance, but he found a way to save 30% of time of his salespeople. He got back 30%. Who wouldn't want to increase productivity in any unit by 30%? And they're using AI. The second thing is know what problem you're solving. AI isn't always the answer. It might be that you can do it another way. And just throwing AI at the problem isn't always going to solve it. And the third thing is, what makes you special? He knew the 4 levers he could pull as an organisation. If he moved any one of those, he could be really, really successful. And he then knew that AI in a certain way could help them in their business. So the question you might be asking now, well, Andrew, how should I be using AI? And obviously, you should be using it with Joule and you should be using SAP Concur. But you influence a lot of things in your organisation. I was talking to a journalist from Accounting Web just before this presentation. I said, I think the accounting and the financial function of most organisations using tools like SAP Concur, you're actually at the front end. Because the rest of the organisation probably isn't using things as sophisticated as Joule in what you're doing. So you can give them a taste of, we've got this trusted data in our organisation, be expense and travel information, and this platform is able to process it in a way we can make good business decisions. Maybe you, marketing team, business development team, sales team, should look at how you mine and enrich the data you have in your organisation. The first thing you should be using AI for is value creation. So how can you actually save time, money, improve experiences, deeper customer relationships? And I just want to play another little clip here from Chris, because the podcast I asked him about Joule, I also asked him about the CFO Insight study for this year. And he had a really good point about where CFOs are seeing some value creation with AI.
This year's top goal for fueling expansion comes first by optimizing cost, driving efficiency, and finance leaders are turning to automation and AI to drive the performance. They're seeing the benefits of their initial AI investments bearing fruit, and now they're looking for other opportunities to drive those greater efficiencies, ultimately to fuel their growth. AI has the opportunity to automate those mundane financial tasks. And so we're seeing AI teams use it for forecasting, closing the quarter. AI automation is creating new pricing models. AI is being used for fraud monitoring. So if you're a CFO, you say, okay, where can I apply this to my other financial processes?
The other area where you should be using AI is to make you more competitive, and that's what Dell and others are doing. Can you look at the areas where you can win? It's a bit like with AI having the best and brightest people in the same room and being able to ask those questions and having that as your decision partner. And another area is to empower the talent. I think we're going to see a lot of people talking about humans in the loop and humans plus AI. If I get a great decision from my AI agent, then what can I do with that? And I want you to think about AI not as artificial intelligence, but augmented intelligence. We've got humans plus the AI to help us make better business decisions. But curiosity is a mindset. As we saw, I've been curious since age 6. I've always been asking the question, why? And so now you've got tools where you can start to ask questions, why? I'm sure people come to you at short notice saying, give us where we are, the current financial position, what are our debtors, what's our time to pay, all those sorts of things. And it's annoying to have to go off and do these reports and stop what you're doing. But imagine having that chat GPT-like interface, asking those questions, getting the answers back in real time. What I think AI is going to do, though, is massively transform how work gets done in every industry and every role. So I want to look briefly at how AI is transforming work at a very high level. I want to use the analogy of the internal combustion engine. The engine wasn't a product. It was a technology that converts energy into mechanical work. And so when the engine was developed, suddenly we shifted who did work. The farmer no longer ploughed the field himself. A tractor did it with an internal combustion engine. We took this concept of converting energy into work, in this case mechanical work, and we applied it everywhere. We invented our transportation systems. We had steam engines that then allowed a mail network to open. Then we had automobiles and gas stations and all those sorts of things. Everything changed. I think what we're seeing with AI, it's actually quite similar. It's a machine that converts data into intellectual work, and we can apply anywhere where data is worth looking at. It has the ability to shift the relationship and the balance of who does work in the world, in this case, cognitive work, how we think. So it is actually going to fundamentally change business processes. It's going to fundamentally change how we look at our organisation, because we've got a decision partner who is much faster and able to do things at speed that we can't do. So we're going to change the way we think in the age of AI and have AI as our cognitive partner. Who here remembers Where's Wally, the cartoon series? Okay, many people. For those of you not familiar, back in the late 80s, an English author developed these children's cartoon books. Basically, there's Wally, who has a red hat and a red and white striped shirt. He is hidden somewhere in this scene on the beach. Let's imagine that scene as your organisation or your industry or your industry. It's full of noise. Somewhere in there is the gold. How can we find that gold? How can we find the Wally in that noise? So being curious, I set myself a task. I asked my AI, find Wally in this picture. I gave it no context. I didn't tell it was a children's cartoon. I didn't tell it what Wally looked like. And I asked it to circle Wally in red, which it did. It found Wally. So how can you find your Wally, your gold in the massive information that's in there? And the tools you're using today, and you heard about most of today, will help you do that. We're also seeing AI get much, much smarter. And we're now moving into the role of reasoning, where rather than a one-shot, it gives you an answer, it will actually take a little bit longer. And I thought, how do I explain to an audience how reasoning works? So I asked AI to develop a question that I could then use to put into AI to explain reasoning. And as an aside, often people say, do you know X, Y, Z? And I go, I don't know, but I'm going to use AI. We'll talk about that in a minute. So let's look at the question the AI thought would be a good way to exercise a reasoning model. Assume the law of physics on Earth. A small strawberry is put into a normal cup. The cup is placed upside down on a table. Someone then takes the cup and puts it in a microwave. Where's the strawberry now? Explain your reasoning step by step. Who thinks they know where the strawberry is? It's on the table, isn't it? We know that. We know how gravity works. So being curious, I thought, why don't I ask this question to a range of AI models to see how it works? So the first one I did, I used ChatGPT 4.0, which is the standard model we use, asked it the question, it went through, it queried that, it got it wrong. It said when you inverted the cup, it stayed at the lowest point in the cup, which is bonkers. So it got it very, very wrong because it hadn't seen that before, or it hadn't reasoned as to gravity having an impact. So what I then did is I changed the model to ChatGPT 1.0, which is a reasoning model. It thinks more deeply. It takes a lot longer to think. So here it's thinking, it's revisiting the question, it's lifting the cup. It got it right, but it took 22 seconds. So it's now thinking more deeply. Now, back in January, late January, there was a Chinese company called DeepSeek that launched their model. So I thought, I'll give the same question to DeepSeek. And I did that, and it got it right, and it took just 6 seconds. So where you need more firepower, where you need to think more deeply, the models are now coming into play. And there's a button you should look at on most tools. It's either called Deep Research or it's called Deep Thinking or whatever. It allows you to think more deeply about a problem. It goes off and consults different sources. So a couple of weeks ago, I was presenting to Fujifilm in Madrid about printers and copiers, a thing I know nothing about other than I've used a photocopier. And they wanted me to show some case studies of where AI is being used in the printing industry. I could have sat there for hours and gone through Google searches, so I told my AI where I was speaking, what I was speaking about, and what I want, and I hit the Deep Research button. And it gave me essentially a PhD level research paper, which was brilliant, and the audience loved it. And I saved myself probably hours and hours and hours just by pushing one little button. A lot of you today, hopefully, are going to leave the room going, I didn't know AI did that. And I want to give you another example. A friend of mine is a TV producer, and one of her best friends is a teacher. And they met for a drink one evening, and the teacher said, I'm sorry I'm late. I've been rushing. I've got to do the lesson plan for the kids tomorrow. I can only stay for one drink. And the TV producer said, you're staying for that second drink because we're going to put your requirements into ChatGPT to see what comes out. And of course, it produced a fantastic lesson plan. And the teacher went, I didn't know AI did that. So I want you to have some of these aha moments. Another friend of mine's having some issues at work. A particular colleague is not liking her communication style. And she said, Andrew, what can I do? I said, well, here's a crazy idea. Why not use your internal AI so it's not going public? Put the last month of emails from this colleague in there, put the last months of your emails in there, and ask it, how can I improve my communication style? And she said, can AI do that? I said, why don't we try? See what comes out. So I want you to think about things that are off the beaten track that you may not have thought about to ask it questions. And one extra line I ask when I'm asking these AI systems a question is I go, and justify your answer. It then thinks more deeply. It kind of shows its internal thinking and working, and I can use my critical thinking to say, I understand how it's come to that reasoning, I agree with it. So just little nuances can actually help you really use these tools more effectively. Now, I think the biggest opportunity for enterprises is an internal GPT. You've kind of got it in Joule with financial and travel data, but what about every other piece of data and what Dell and others are doing? They're basically surfacing all of their corporate information and putting a chat GPT-like interface on top. That is going to be where the real progress will happen in enterprises, I believe. But it's not easy to do. And people that have started doing this have had some false starts, and the users have gone, it's not very helpful, I'll go back to the old way. So persevere, because I think this will be a real fundamental shift in how we uncover the Wally in our data. I thought, well, can I create my own GPT? So for the book, if you get a copy and you ask that curious question, at the very back is a QR code. I developed a GPT of the book. I basically uploaded the PDF, and you can ask the book a question. It will actually tell you all sorts of things. And for things that have changed since it was published last year, it'll tell you about what's new. So try doing some different things. But we talk about ChatGPT a lot. So I want to go beyond ChatGPT and show you a few other tools, they're on the QR code, to whet your appetite about where these tools are going in the future. Show of hands, who's heard of Google's Notebook LM? 1, 2, 2. Wow. So about 2% of my audience have heard of Notebook LM. You're going to love this. This is a tool from Google. It's completely free. It's on the QR code. It basically allows you to upload a PDF, and I uploaded the PDF of my book, and it allows you to then zero in and ask it a bunch of questions. But being the curious fellow I am, I saw on the right-hand side, it allows you to do an audio review. So I thought, that's interesting. I'll push the button. I waited 5 minutes. It delivered me a 31-minute podcast with 2 AI-generated hosts talking about the book. Let's have a listen to 30 seconds of the podcast.
So we're going to dig into what he really means by this whole digital curiosity thing, why it should matter to you.
Businesses led by digitally curious people are, well, seriously outperforming everyone else.
They're not just keeping up, it sounds like. They're gaining a real edge.
Exactly.
He even has this concept, he calls it the Starbucks test. Have you ever noticed how you'll be like overhearing people at a coffee shop and suddenly everyone's talking about some new tech? That's your cue.
Now you might say, Andrew, that's cute, it's a gimmick, and it's American, but that's version 1. Version 2 is me and you and different voices. And then I thought, well, where could this work in corporate world? So, travel policies. We talked about them not being exciting, or compliance. Some people's learning style is not reading, it's listening. So you could turn some of these documents into essentially podcasts that people would listen to. Maybe they would enjoy it. And actually, if you're eagle-eyed, you'll see below the play bar there, it says interactive mode. If this was live, I could push the button. I could actually interact and ask the guests questions about the content that I uploaded. I just want you to try these tools, because when you do that, you go, oh, wow, this is a whole different angle in terms of how AI can help me. Otter AI is my favorite transcription tool. Many of you have used it as well. So what this does is allows me to record a meeting, either on my phone, or you can have a Teams or a Zoom plug-in. It transcribes the meeting. It gives you meeting minutes. But on the right, it actually has an inbuilt GPT. So I can start asking it questions about the meeting. Who spoke the most? What are the action points? Now, I'm doing 3 to 4 of these talks a week. I'm getting a bit confused about where I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to do. So I record my client calls, and then go back and go, where am I supposed to be? How long have I got to present? What's the subject? And it actually allows me to delve into that. I also used Otter to help me write the book. The book actually contains 60 podcast guests. That's nearly 60 hours of audio. And to go through that would be a real headache. So I uploaded all of the podcast audio files to Otter, transcribed them, then I started asking questions. Where was that thing where we talked about quantum computing? Where was the thing about AI in the enterprise? And it pulled all this stuff out. So rather than having to write 74,000 words from scratch, I had 500,000 words to play with. So that's me using the tools very effectively. I'll give you one other example of how I've used this. Obviously, I have a podcast. One of my previous episodes was from a good friend of mine who's an opera singer who has a fantastic story about being asked to sing on the stage of Sydney Opera House with 4 hours' notice. We thought, what a great story for corporates. So I edited the podcast in a coffee shop, ready to go. I thought, it needs an intro. I could go home, write an intro, record it in my studio, and then produce it. But I thought, why don't I actually upload the podcast to Otter, transcribe it, put it into Perplexity, my favorite AI tool, and ask it to generate a 1-minute intro that's snappy. And then I used a tool, which I'll show you a bit later on, called Perplexity, to actually record the audio. In fact, remember the person that introduced me onto stage? That was AI. And that was developed 15 minutes before I came on stage. Kenzie said, oh, we're not going to have anyone introduce you. So I thought, okay, I'll actually create my own voice of God. So I'm actually using the tools in real time to get my job done. And this is Perplexity that I really love, because it works in many ways the way ChatGPT does, but it allows you to choose different models, and the way it presents information and sources, I think, is second to none. And they're always innovating. So again, don't just try ChatGPT, try all the tools available. It's also on the QR code. And as I mentioned, I want you to think of AI as your decision partner. If you've got a critical decision to make, you can provide it with enough information, it will give you a series of options. But one thing that won't go away in the age of AI is the need for critical thinking. I do a lot of talks to schools and universities, and what worries me is that you're going to have students entering the workforce that will be using these tools, but not actually questioning what's coming out of them. You need to have that critical thinking with everything you're doing. That's why I said before, you actually have to have better humans that are going to exercise this critical thinking. Now, over the last few weeks, AI has been in the news a lot because CEOs have said, we are going to mandate AI. And the CEO of Shopify sent a memo around to all of his staff saying, before asking for more headcount and resources, teams must demonstrate why they can't get done what they want done using AI. And Duolingo said this. He actually walked it back a few weeks later. A headcount will only be given if a team cannot automate more of their work. Now, it's great for me that CEOs are saying, you are doing AI. I get brought in and I help them explain how they should do that. But I think it's very unhelpful. Because me, in the trenches, what I'm seeing is that these sorts of mandates aren't helpful. Because the first thing people say is, I haven't been trained on how to use this. I know we've got Copilot, but I'm not really sure how to use it. And the things I've shown you today, you might go, I didn't know that we could actually do that with our tool. The second thing I'm seeing is budgets. Most of the companies I've spoken to this year are not thinking about 2026 in terms of what they're going to do with AI, in terms of training, platforms they need, and process re-engineering. And the third thing is a problem that's been around for years. It's data. The data we've got is not ready for AI yet. So if a CEO says this to you, the first question you say is, well, first of all, bring Andrew in to calm you down. But we need to level set so everyone understands what it is that we're actually doing in the world of AI. Now, I've talked about a lot of good things about AI. I want to spend a moment talking about the responsible use of AI. Because in your environment, you're going to start to see some bad stuff happening, especially if you work in finance, have to approve transactions worth hundreds of thousands and maybe millions of pounds. And a couple of years ago, I was at an event, an AI event in London, and Stephen Fry spoke. And he talked about how his voice had been used without his permission.
So here's a short extract of me performing the commentary for a film about a Dutch resistance group's fight against the Nazis.
14th of May, 1940. Germany invades the Netherlands. Reichskommissar Arthur Seyss-Inquart appoints SS Hauptsturmführer Ferdinand Aus der Funten to ensure that the Netherlands is cleansed of Jews.
I said not one word of that. It was a machine. Yes, it shocked me. They used my reading of just 7 audiobooks, the Harry Potter novels, and from that data set, an AI of my voice was created, and it made that new narration. What I played you included, as you heard, a variety of German and Dutch names and general vocabulary. Hauptsturmführer, for example, Arthur Seyss-Inquart. All those names and all those words, of course, are not in Rowling's books.
So that was 2 years ago, where I think AI has become, or voice cloning has become pretty close. I've alluded to it before, but I thought, well, could I create my own AI clone? Let's have a listen. Hi, everyone. Yes, this is really me. It's AI Andrew. Pretty convincing, isn't it? So I can now drop my voice in as I did with the podcast. I can even do video. This is from a year or so ago as well. It's okay. But if you've been watching the news, last week Google announced their new VO3, which is mind-blowing. I was looking for a good example to show you. I think this one shows it well because both the voice and the video is completely AI generated.
Oh boy, I love accents. Can't wait for summer, eh?
Need to get inside, it's so cold.
It's freezing up here. We make the best food here.
Which is the fastest way to the airport?
I need a drink.
Hey mate, want to come to the pub?
We should get something to eat, no?
Hey mate, wanna come to the boozer?
So this is in 2025, it's only going to get better. And if you've looked across LinkedIn, people are doing fake news items. I saw another thing on LinkedIn where basically there was a guy in a few years' time going to a movie theatre, and he said, what's the cost to go to the movie? He said, would you like organic or AI generated? AI generated is £5. If you want an organic movie made by humans, it's £1,000. So I think we're going to start to see AI flooding it. But here's the issue. Voice cloning is there, and now with Google VO3, video cloning is there. So those of you that sat down before when I asked if you had two-factor turned on, and I jokingly said you're going to get hacked, let me look at a little scenario. So your Gmail password's pretty bad, and someone hacks in there. You don't know that they're there. They sit there for weeks, possibly months. They learn the names of your children, your spouse, where you like going on holiday, all the sort of things that only you know about. And then someone you care about gets a frantic phone call or a video call as you asking for money. It's now so good you don't know if it's them or not, and they know everything about you. So I guarantee you, if you remember nothing else from my talk this afternoon, you'll remember this next slide. To beat the criminals, we need to use low tech. So you need a family password, a word or phrase that only you and the closest people to you know. And so when you get that frantic phone call, it doesn't sound quite right, you go, so what's the family password? And they'll hang up. Now, those of you working in expense management and travel asked to make important decisions, you probably also need a team password. Just the team knows, so when someone asks to transfer all this money, you go, okay, what's the team password? And they either know it or they don't. You might go into, this is a bit far-fetched. You, as a futurist, of course, you're saying this. Well, January last year, Arup, the engineering firm, had a deep fake of their CFO call one of their people in Hong Kong. The person in Hong Kong transferred $25 million. But what amazes me is they transferred it in 15 separate transactions. Only on the 16th transaction they go, this doesn't seem right. So it's happening. So you need to protect yourself, you need to turn two-factor on, and you also need to have a family password. Now, as I said about the QR code, I have thrown a lot of information at you, and I've done that deliberately. But help is at hand. In every room, in every team, in every organisation, there are two tribes. There's the going digital, from stand up and sit down, a lot of you in the room because you're experienced, but your digital skills are developing. And then we have the born digital. Their first toy was a smartphone. They live and breathe this stuff. You need a way to get the two tribes to come together. And the best way is actually to organise a hackathon. It used to be that technology companies would do hackathons, and Gmail and some other tools have actually been developed as a late-night hackathon. Well, if you get those two tribes in the room, not only will the born digital get a chance to explain all their crazy ideas and all the things they've seen, the going digital will understand how different people think, and there'll be that sharing of information. And whenever I suggest this, people go, what a really good idea. How do we do it? Well, you actually give the task to the born digital, and it does itself. So I've got a bunch of resources. I've got the podcast and the book. But as the actionable futurist, I'm going to leave you with 5 things that I want you to consider today, tomorrow, next week. The first is, be more digitally curious. Those 6 things at the top of the talk, why aren't you doing those, and could you do them, and why not? Try out 5 new AI tools, and up next is the QR code with those on it. If you're not already, investigate Dual. I'm not just on stage in SAP Concur saying that. I'm going to be using Chris's clips and the Dual example at other talks because it's a great example of where Agentic AI is going. Develop an AI action plan, even for your own department. What are we going to do? Andrew said all this stuff. Some of it made sense, some of it didn't. Let's put a plan together. And finally, run a hackathon. What's the worst that can happen? Okay, here's the QR code. Scan it. Bookmark it. If you don't like QR codes, go to curious.click/concur, and it will have all those resources I spoke about. Thank you so much for your attention, and stay curious.